All right, so we're recording. So thank you guys so much for joining me today and everybody in the chat and whatnot. This is Taboo Talk. It is the safe space for finding the edge of the status quo. So what we're going to really push the edge of the status quo on today is fear and failure, which can be, I was thinking about it as I was preparing for the talk today. Sometimes those topics are almost over-talked from like a self-help or an inspirational perspective. So the angle that we're going to kind of dive into today is more the mechanics of, okay, great, you can use fear to fuel something, or failure might lead to success, but what is the how of that? And I think everybody that I've asked to be a guest has experience and expertise enough that we can really kind of get into the mechanics. And we're just going to see where the conversation goes. So to kick things off, I'm Sunny. I'm the host of Taboo Talk, and I run a business. I do business strategy. I'm an entrepreneur. I live in Orlando. I have a tiny house, and I'm extremely opinionated and blunt, and that's kind of my little ones over there. And then I'm just going to kind of pass the baton to you guys and just say how I know you guys, just to give everybody an idea of how little or how much we're related. So I met Tavana at a business networking event maybe 6 months ago. We've had a couple of phone calls. And other than that, I really just know her through social media. And Terry, I'm pointing like they can see where I'm pointing, but I know you guys are all mismatched. Terry and I were bunkmates at an adult entrepreneur kind of summer camp in August. And I haven't really talked to her since. So I kind of know you guys equal much, but I will let you guys introduce yourself. So Tavana, do you want to go first and just tell everybody a little bit about who you are?
Sure. I'm Tavana Denise, and I'm a business and life coach for people who want to have location independent businesses. They want to really live the lives of their dreams. And my claim to fame, I guess, is after multiple failures, really finally figuring out how to get rid of 80 pounds and keep it off. So
awesome. And Terry, you want to give us the once over on who you are?
I am a licensed psychotherapist. I am a transformation coach. I have my own podcast. I do a lot of writing, and I'm an expert on fear and transforming fear, sort of understanding the mind-body connection to fear because of a lot of it, because of life experience and because I've been a therapist for 20 years. Yeah, that's
awesome.
Me.
Awesome. Sweet. So I have research and I have questions to ask and kind of prompts to like poke at us, but for the most part, we're just going to kind of talk and see where the chat takes us. So great. I guess the first thing that I have been really thinking a lot about in my research, that's the best thing for me about doing the Taboo Talks, is I do research the week before and it kind of takes me down all these rabbit holes and I feel like I'm a student again, which has really been kind of fun. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I kept coming up against is that a lot of the articles that are written around fear treat it like it's something to be avoided. Like it's a thing that's bad, it's wrong, we shouldn't experience it. If we do experience it, we should figure out how to fix it. And I couldn't help but feel like I spent a whole year pushing myself to be uncomfortable. And I felt like that little bit of fear was really what pushed me and had me be successful and really transform my life. So I don't feel like there's a lot of conversation about how fear can actually be a good thing and we should embrace it. And I want to see if you guys have had any similar experiences or have anything to add on to that.
Oh, yes, of course. I mean, here's my 2 cents on the whole thing about people wanting the talk about being fearless. This is all like languaging, and it's all stuff that isn't real, because what's real is, as a human being, fear is a byproduct of being alive. And so it's all how you relate to fear. It's all how you see it. So do you have can you embrace it? I always try to inspire my clients, like, to get it. Like, fear can be very wise. And so fear has a lot to teach you. If you try to dismiss your fear or kind of muscle through your fear without looking at it, you're doing yourself a disservice. So fear can absolutely fuel the things that you want to do. I always reframe it with my clients, unless it's a phobia or unless someone has a gun to your head. Now, then you should be afraid. But I'm talking about being afraid of taking a leap or changing careers or whatever it may be, that it's anticipatory excitement, I like to call it, rather than fear, even though they feel a lot alike. And I think making that distinction can make a big difference in how someone experiences it. Yes, you're going to be uncomfortable. That's okay. Instead of turning away from this thing that you fear, I it's so much faster and so much more productive to just turn towards it. Just open your eyes and see what it is. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah. How about you, Tavon?
Well, I definitely agree with that. I think one of the things that has helped me be successful here lately is to, like you said, to examine it and figure out where is the fear coming from and find out, is there any truth behind the fear? A lot of times we are fearful. We worry about things that we think might happen that never actually occur. And it stops us. So that was one of the things that I had to really let me take a look at all of the things that I've been fearful about and that I haven't done. And has any of that actually ever come to fruition? Most of it hasn't. The other thing that I really come to find out about fear for me is that it is somewhat of a North Star, in that the thing that I fear the most is the thing that I need to do. And when I actually step into that fear, as like even now my heart is beating hard as I think about a scary thing that I need to do or I want to do, it's like it never steers me wrong if I just go with it. And you're absolutely right. I don't think people.
I think a lot of what we're circling around now, though, is more. So I guess 2 things to say about it. We're circling around more of like the existential fear, like fear of like something that you've overthought and like a situation that you're afraid might happen. That's more like situational. And I think that a lot of what we're pointing to is kind of almost along the lines of self-awareness and like training that monkey brain, as I call it, to notice like, oh, I'm scared of something. How interesting. Do I need to step into it? Is this my, my instinct telling me to avoid it? Do I need to, so there's a certain amount of self-awareness, I think, that we're talking about and pointing to as far as like a maturity with your relationship to yourself.
I think that it's about becoming the observer. This is what years ago, Deepak Chopra, when I first went to the Chopra Center a long time ago, probably 15 years ago, that this whole notion of becoming the observer was, at that point in my life, it was a new sort of idea or an ideal, where I like to say with my clients, it's sort of being able to see the forest and the trees. So you're in a situation, and if you can be mindful enough to go, like you said, Sunny, I'm having this fearful response. That's interesting. And then taking it one step further, where, you call it your monkey mind, I call it your mafia mind, because it's such a bully and so just blackmailing the joy out of your life with the fear of what might happen. You want to be like, yeah, guess what? A lot of shit might happen. And a lot of stuff, as you just said, Tavana, is not going to happen. And instead of projecting fearfully into the future, because that's when you think about fear, unless you're in mortal danger, you're really talking about worrying about crap that has not happened, that might happen. It could be embarrassing. It could be, you could fail spectacularly. You could. And as my mother would say, years ago, I would come home with whatever my fearful thing was. So what if this boy doesn't like me? I like this boy, but I'm afraid, 3rd grade, I remember her saying. And so what if then what happens? Well, then I'll be embarrassed. I'll cry. I'll be sad. She's like, yeah, then what happens?
And
then I'll just feel terrible. She's like, she would teach me to sort of deduce, where you go down that what if highway. And in the end, you realize this is life. Like, what's going to happen if that boy doesn't like me is I'm going to survive. And there's going to be another boy is basically what I learned from my mother. Like, it's going to be okay. Dominic LaPiccolo, he's not the one that got away. Don't worry. That'll be someone else.
It's interesting. I was watching a TED Talk from Jonathan Fields, which actually runs the camp that I met Terry at. And he has a TED Talk, it's older, on fear. And one of the things that he suggests towards the end of his TED Talk is to sit down and actually play out the probable future of that fear and really look at, okay, if that happens, what's the worst case scenario? And what's my recovery plan if that thing happens? To kind of give yourself a much more tangible, in reality way to deal with it versus having it all be in your head. So yeah, I think it's really kind of what you're pointing to as well, Terry. It's really smart.
It's a good visualization though of what your dad is saying, because it's sort of like that's very similar to me saying you turn towards it, you actually unpack it and look at it. And now the power that it had when it was just this amorphous, like childlike fear. And this is another thing from a psychotherapeutic point of view, that so much of the time, the things that we fear are the child within us. It's a child's fear, not an adult fear, which is why it feels so overwhelming, or it's so not in line with what's actually happening. It's like the fear that someone's actually going to die if you confront them, or that you're going to die. But that's a child's fear, right? Because nobody dies when we have a confrontation. You might be uncomfortable, as you were saying before, but I think that there's something really valuable about what your dad said about sort of doing that visualization where you realize, yeah, I'm really not that fragile. Like, unless someone does have a gun to my head, I'm probably going to be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Terry, would you do me a favor and angle your camera up just a little bit? I keep losing your face behind your name placard, and I want to see your gorgeous mug.
This way?
Yeah. There we go.
All right.
Okay, so we're talking about, again, I feel like we keep talking about more existential fears, like the fear of being rejected or the fear of failure. And I think that's what most adults deal with, right? I think by the time you're an adult, you're pretty clear on when fear to a real actual fight or flight thing is happening versus it's existential. But I know that I have people in my world. In fact, I've got a couple of clients that I coach where the fear of their business failing is so tangible for them that they actually have like a fight or flight response to it. Mm-hmm. And I realized I was having a little bit of that for myself when I was looking to leave the corporate world. And so I'd actually declared the year of making myself uncomfortable. And anytime I started to like feel that fear, I intentionally stepped into it. And so by making that declaration, that was how I handled the self-awareness, the mafia brain, the monkey brain, and really kind of conditioning myself to push through it and get past like that physical reaction. How have you ladies dealt with it when you actually have like a physical fear-based response to something? How have you conditioned yourself to work through it, push past it, be with it, however you deal with it?
Tavani,
or have you never experienced that?
So I do.
You could be badasses.
Oh no, yeah, of course I have. I have a few tools in my tool bag. So one of the things comes to a lot of journaling and writing down what are all of the thoughts creating the fear. And examining them for what is truth and what is just my opinion. And the other one is just having people that I can go to that are outside of me. Sometimes I'm not a good observer, like Terry was talking about. So then I have someone else to say, okay, that's not even true. Like, why are you thinking that? Those kinds of things. So it's very important for me to have other people in my life that see the best in me when I sometimes can't see it for myself.
That's great. Because I had such a long, in my life, I had such a journey with fear that I went from being pretty fearless, and then I had this year experience. You had your year of being uncomfortable, and I had the year that I got my PhD in fear, where in a short period of time, I met, the best thing in my life happened, and I met the man who would become my husband, and then I got diagnosed with cancer. My father dropped dead. I got diagnosed with cancer. I got diagnosed with cancer again, and then I got held up at gunpoint. Speaking of having a gun to your head. And so those things all happening in a year period of time created a very paralyzing fear in my life. So I went from being sort of very fearless to being super filled with fear. And not just the traumatic response from it, but I really realized like, wow, if I don't figure this out, if fear continues to dictate my thoughts, my whole entire like, I'm never going to live my dharma. I'm never going to do what I'm meant to do on this planet because it's keeping my life super small. So I've come up with a zillion things, not just personally to do, but in the past 20 years as a psychotherapist, because that's how long this has gone on, of how do you step away from, how do you identify, as Tavana, you were just saying, you have trouble sort of identifying what is your opinion, right, which is your fearful opinion, from what is sort of the truth. And I think the first thing what I do is I have a dedicated meditation practice. And I was the least likely person on planet Earth to ever have that experience. I was a talent agent, working a crazy life, working crazy hours and traveling like crazy anyway. I tried for years to have this meditation practice, and it took me probably 8 years of trying and failing until I finally went to the Chopra Center, and I learned there. And it really changed my life. And the thing that you can gain from something like a dedicated practice, or what I gained, was just about 2 seconds of response time in any situation in my life. So now, instead of the reaction, which could be a fearful reaction to many things, I just had like a second to take a deep breath and just not go down that road. Just
to notice potentially.
Yes, to observe and go, huh, I guess I could flip out about that, or I guess I could just not, you know?
And yeah, and I think you're kind of sort of responding to Sarah's question on how do you dig your way out of that fear. And I know, so I've got some crazy, I've lived a lot of lives. I'm in my mid-30s and I've lived a lot of lives for somebody my age. And I've had a couple of abusive relationships in my past. I've had experiences where I've had a gun to my head. And I know it might not be the healthiest way, but I think it's a very human way to respond. Is I've done a lot of things as, excuse my language, but kind of a fuck you. Like, you think you're going to get me down. You think you're going to do this to me. Well, I'm going to go make my life really freaking awesome just to show you that that didn't work. And now, you know, I'm older. I've done some work. I meditate. I've done some transformation. And I definitely have a much more love-based response. And in the moment when you have that fight or flight response and you really do have something that you fear, and then it feels like a very real possibility that could happen again, I feel like a very human way to respond sometimes is just to rise above and to like use it again to fuel you. And that's how for me in those situations, especially the younger version of myself, that was how I use that fear to fuel something. It is kind of a big, like, prove it.
Yep.
Right? Like, bring it.
Yep. Yeah, I can do it. It's also, though, I think, you know, from a therapeutic point of view, it's an adaptive response, because anything that gets you sort of where you're going is adaptive, because instead of saying F you that way, you could have started shooting heroin.
Totally.
But you didn't. Because that would be like a fuck you to you, right? So instead,
right, you know, catch your nose off, spite your face, kind of thing. Yeah,
exactly. I want to go to Sarah's question about like daily activities, just quickly, because I think that there's something about fear that when people start becoming more intimate with their own fears and what they really are, and even clients and, you know, the things that I write about don't even recognize how much fear is driving their daily experience. And so the first thing, as I would say, Sarah, is really creating some expansion internally. Just taking a deep breath, starting your day with 5 minutes of meditation, set your intention, have faith that things are going to work out as you take steps, obviously, towards whatever it is that you want to do. But it's like harnessing the mind-blowing power of your own intention to not live in fear is a huge first step.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to address the question too, because when we talk about fear and what you see in the news and things like that, I haven't watched the news and I can't tell you how many years, well over a decade, because I just think that it's a control measure for the news to put all of those things and to leave out the good things that are happening in the world. What are the actual odds when you think about your children walking out on the street? When you look at the sheer hard numbers of it, what are the odds of your children being taken by strangers? What are the odds of your children being taken in sex trafficking? And I did a duathlon for an organization here that is against sex trafficking, and it's tragic. It really is. And so I'm not discounting that at all. But when we talk about being fearful on a daily basis, again, that thing that has not happened, has a low probability of happening. One of the things that I use to combat that is to just not pay attention to it. Because in fact, I was watching a movie the other day, and forgive me, I don't know the name, with Tom Hanks in it. And he was, one of the characters in it was supposedly about to go to death row. And so Tom Hanks was asking him, he's like, well, aren't you worried? And the character would respond, would it help?
Would it make a difference? Yeah, it was awesome.
Every time, he would say, well, would it help? And so every time there was a situation like that, he would just respond, would it help? And so when I'm from the DC area, and when the DC sniper was around shooting up everything and everybody, it wasn't everything and everybody, because it was only 12 people in the grand scheme of things. I have to know that if I'm still here and I wake up in the morning, it's because I'm supposed to be here. And when I'm supposed to go, I'm supposed to go. And I have no control over that. And so that's what helps me not to be fearful over things that we could be seeing in the news like that. So I'm not sure if that's helpful to you, but that's just how I see it and how I deal with it on a day-to-day basis.
I think too that specifically, I know Sarah, she's got some awesome kids, and I also tend to be pretty active in the anti-trafficking space. And I think that there's a lot specifically to that question, Sarah, about education and intuition. Making sure that like there are actual things, like real life things that it is appropriate to be afraid of. But the more we educate ourselves and educate our children on how to respond, I think that that goes a long way towards that. And there's a certain amount of training our children. And we talked about this last week on the parenting one, actually, on modeling for them how to follow your intuition. Like logically, this seems like a safe situation, but mommy doesn't feel good, so we're going to leave. And, you know, teaching them that it's safe and it's okay to do that. You don't necessarily have to have like a real life justification. Sometimes you just don't feel right.
It's funny. One of my friends wrote a book. She was a sexual abuse survivor, and she wrote a kid's book, and it was called "Do You Ever Get the Heebie-Jeebies?" And it's about teaching little ones to trust their intuition in a way that kids can understand. It's actually a really great book. I'm not sure if it's even in print or where it is, but it's so smart to teach kids that they don't have to kiss people they don't want to. You know, like how parents are like, kiss gross, yicky uncle, whoever. Like, no, stop making kids kiss people they don't want to kiss. Okay, stop it.
Can you say the name again? I'll see if I can't find it and include it.
Yes, it's called "Do You Ever Get the Heebie-Jeebies?" And actually, one of my sons illustrated it when he was in high school.
Yeah, I'll look for it later. Nice. Okay. I went looking for what the top fears are. And as with any study, I feel like it's so dependent on how they ask the question and what they ask and if they give you multiple choice. Because Time Magazine put a study out that said that in America, the top fear, it was something ridiculous. 58% of people, their top fear is corruption of U.S. government officials. And I'm like, no. Okay. Yeah. Seriously. So, and I know like
one of two choices.
Right, exactly. They're all politically related. So it's, you know, it's like you got to kind of manage that when you look for this stuff. But, you know, I think that I know public speaking is typically the number one fear. Death is usually somewhere around number 4 if it's a really broad study. But Amy in the chat had asked, like, how do we know if what we're experiencing is actually like something we need to fear versus our brain just messing with us and trying to tease us and get its way and entice us to do something? How do you guys kind of do that gut check to know when there's actually a fear for a reason versus a fear out of some outside source or like a fear of failure kind of thing? How do you differentiate the two for yourself?
I think that there's a different voice. I think that your intuition talks a particular way. There's no agenda for me with my intuition. It's clear. It's quiet. You you go into a room or you pass someone or someone's walking close to you. Your intuition says, get the hell away from this person. I will stop walking. I will lean up against a building. I will make them pass me or whatever it is. Your fear mind just isn't nice. Your fear mind is like, well, of course this is happening because you're an idiot. Like your fear mind is not nice. That this is within my own experience. And so your intuition is more like a knowing. Again, I bring this back to there has to be some space of stillness and silence for you to be able to know what you're hearing, know what's happening. You have to slow down. And I guarantee you there are people who are watching this who are scheduled within an inch of their life, right? Like always late, always rushing, because you never have to feel anything or think anything because if you've already predetermined that the main thing you're going to feel is stressed about being late. But what happens is that you put yourself in this one down position, you know. So I just say that because I know from being a therapist that people with time issues both ways. It's just a way of just avoiding what you really need to deal with in life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I always joke that I have multiple people in my head. Like I'm not, I don't have any actual disorder, but I feel like I have different characters that take over my brain sometimes. And I have like the 95-year-old lady that I call Ethel. And then I have like the teenage boy that's somewhere between like a teenage boy that's angsty and like a mean girl. And I feel like when it's like fear of something that I'm making up, it's the mean girl, the teenager that's talking. And when it's like a fear of something legit, it's like Ethel wanting to take care of me like a grandmother and wanting to protect me. But there's like a distinct difference in the way I talk to myself based on, where it's coming from. And I want to echo what you were saying, Terry, about having even if you schedule it into your busy schedule, to have time where you do nothing. I feel like that is really huge, especially for entrepreneurs in dealing with the fear factor. Like having the time to just sit and be and notice and really take into account how the rest of your day is scheduled out and where you're resisting and where you're not. And yeah, I think that's really huge.
For me, it's where I feel it. So if it's in my stomach or if it's in my throat, if it's in my heart, that's how I can kind of tell who's real and who's not. And then of course, like, will it cause me bodily harm or not really? So. Yeah.
There's I'll have to go find it. I think Sarah might have actually shared it, Sarah Piggott, in the chat. There was a graphic that was making its way around social media at some point that was where you feel different emotions in the body. And it was like a heat map on a body that actually showed physically what lights up, what goes dark, what goes red when you feel different emotions. And I think it's probably different for everybody a little bit, right? But that's a really good point, the physicality of fear.
Yes, I always ask clients, like, that's something that when we're dealing with stuff, to always identify where in your body do you feel it. And if it's in your throat, as you were saying, I mean, also if you know anything about the chakra system, you're like, oh, I'm telling you, when I feel a constriction in my throat around something, I literally pay attention and say, so what are you not saying? What is it that needs to come out, but you're not actually doing it? And then taking a moment with my clients, I have an exercise that I'll give them to do where the moment you feel the constriction, so you have a fearful thought, it creates a constriction somewhere in your body. So as Tivana was saying, maybe your throat, maybe your gut, whatever it is. In a moment, you have to name it and say, that's fear. Because keep in mind, you could be walking down the street feeling perfectly fine. Have a fearful thought, as you were saying, and then you have a physical reaction to that thought. But nothing actually changed in actual real life. You just thought of something. So there suddenly wasn't a bear coming to eat you, or someone didn't have a gun to your head. And if you can get it in your own mind that you actually have power over your body, take a moment, recognize, wow, that's fear. Okay. And now take a deep breath into that spot where you felt it. You can also look and say, what is the fear telling me? Is it true? Very much like Byron Katie's work, right? Is it true? Is there truth to that? Or am I just projecting catastrophically into the future about some crap that hasn't even happened yet? Which is 95% of the time.
Definitely. Sarah had a question before I shift gears. Sarah says she's heard that the body reacts to imagined or thought up threats the same as live fear. I would say so.
Oh, it's a scientific fact. Fact that you look at Olympic athletes, the way that your mind does, your body, you cannot tell the difference. How if you know, there's all these stories about Olympic athletes where they go through the course in their mind and their body responds exactly as if they're going down whatever it is, because your body doesn't know. So we're torturing ourselves. Like people who say they're warriors, that's literally praying for the exact opposite of what you want to happen. Because every time you think of like something happening to your child, your body is like, wait, did something happen to them? Oh no, just in my mind. I'm just projecting catastrophically into the future. But you're
manufacturing that response.
Yeah. Right. Here's the thing. You're manufacturing the thought, but your body is manufacturing the response because it doesn't know if it happened or not, you know?
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of the movie The Matrix. Like if you died in the Matrix in your mind, that was it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if it's true or not, but I've always been told that if you die in a dream, that it's entirely possible to actually die in your sleep in real life because your body responds and thinks that you've died. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it's kind of Matrixy as well. I'll have to go Google that one now that I've said that and put it out there.
I'm going to say probably not, but I like it for the Matrix conversation. So.
So let's shift gears just a little bit. And we've been talking a lot about fear. And I know it didn't come up in any of the studies, but I know in my world, most of the people that I talk to on a regular basis, the biggest fear they have is failure, which is why I kind of lumped the two together. And, you know, I was actually in line to get dinner with my brother earlier, and he, we're talking about tonight's blab, and he brought up Malcolm Gladwell and The Outliers. I love Malcolm Gladwell. In The Outliers, he talks about, it's where he started to coin the idea that you have your 10,000 hours that makes you an expert, and that there's people who are kind of outside of the norm and they get their experience in these really weird ways. It's been a while since I read the book, but it's definitely worth a read. But he basically talks about, like, I remember the Beatles specifically, that they had to fail a lot and they had to spend 10,000 hours screwing up and then trying again and rewriting and working in these crazy, bars all around Germany and whatnot in order to get the experience they needed to become the experts. So when they did hit it big, they had what they needed to, the recipe for success. And that's where I kind of circle back to the idea that there's stories and after story of that. I know Steve Jobs had a bunch of rejections. Oprah Winfrey had a bunch of rejections. J.K. Rowling, when she wrote Harry Potter, was rejected. I think Dr. Seuss was rejected 27 times before he was published. So we hear all these stories of these really successful people that have documented failures before they have their documented success. But what I don't hear a lot of, and I don't really see a lot of other than from therapists in the room one-on-one, is what are the mechanics of how you do that? And I guess a lot of us, I'm lumping myself in with them now. Once we've get to the point where we've used that failure and allowed it to propel us to success, we're so in the zone with success that we don't necessarily analyze the mechanics of how. But now that I've said all that, I'll let you guys respond. Where does that take you guys mentally?
Well, one of the things that I use in the mechanics of it is, I don't believe that you're ever given a desire to do, be, or have something without being given the tools to achieve it or the resources to achieve it. So once I chose to believe that, so it was a choice of my own. And once I chose to believe that, then everything that happened that wasn't so pleasant was like, okay, how am I going to be able to use this? And I saw somewhere fail is like first attempt in learning. So what I want to do is find evidence and find things that support me in realizing that this fail is not forever. It's not final. It's not the end of the world. It's just a stepping stone. And so that, for me, the mechanics of it is just finding affirmations and things that I can use to step on to get to the success.
I think that it depends on how resilient someone is inside your own sense of self. Because it depends on how you look at failure. I mean, I've had so many spectacular failures in my careers, my many careers, that, when I was younger, some of them felt super humiliating at the time if I was really young. But the truth is that, are they really failures? Or are they, this is how we learn. How else can we learn except to fail? And so if you're not willing to fail big, you will never be as successful as you could actually be in your life. That's my 2 cents.
Because, I want to say that again, because you just said something juicy there that was kind of embedded in all that. Fail big. I love that. And I don't think that people say that very much. I've seen it in some of the books that I've read. But yeah, like the idea of being willing to take on a risk really big and know that it might lead to a really huge failure. On the other side of that, like the flip side is that it could be a really huge success, but we spend so much time with that fear thing happening where we feel the fear, the failure, that we continually look at what could go wrong versus acknowledging like how awesome it could be if it went right.
But from a therapeutic point of view, because I do actually write quite a bit about fear of failure and fear of success, I really think are two sides of the same coin. And the coin is fear of change. Like, who will I be if I start making more money than my husband? How will that impact my marriage?
Oh, fear of success is a whole nother beast. Totally.
But the truth is, it is and it isn't. Because again, if we go back to it, really is fear of change. How will, if you're, look at your family system, your family of origin, if you're like not the hero child, let's say, how will your massive success disrupt you in that family system? You know what I mean? And how many people watching have friends who are like, not a lot of them, but everyone has at least one friend or has had who is like only happy when you're miserable. They're like the best friend you've ever had in the world. When you're down and out, they're like, I got you. Come on, we're going to do this. And the second your life starts getting good, they're like, oh, what? Who does she think? Like, I don't have those people in my life anymore. But when I was younger, I definitely did. And so I think that the conversation, we could even make it a little bit bigger and really look at fear of failure and fear of success. Because really what we're looking at is fear of change, you know?
Yeah.
That's deep. One more thing that I've started using recently in terms of mechanics of getting past failure is to look at it with curiosity and look at it with, one of my mentors said, a scientist's eye. Because if I'm trying to do this big, hairy, scary thing and I just want to see what happens, then the fear of failure kind of goes away because I'm detached from it. I no longer, it's not on me. It's not a problem with my character and not being good enough. I'm just running an experiment and I just want to see what happens. Yeah.
Yep. There's something about that that is so, that reframe that you just shared is so powerful because, again, if we go back to success or failure, it's the meaning that we prescribe, what we assign to failure. That's what it means to us because that's what inside, whether we're aware of it or not, that's what it means. So if you're a perfectionist, if you have the disease to please, if you're the hero child in your family, then there's a need. Like it is like you think if you fail, you're going to die. You know, there's that fear connected to it.
And it gets like that biological response. Yeah.
Oh my God. And then you're in fight or flight. I have clients who are super successful, but who are in fight or flight all the time. And, come to me because they need to learn how to meditate. They don't think they can or whatever it is. And you burn out your adrenals and all of the things that happen when you remain that good little girl who can't let anyone down. The truth is, it's okay to fail. We're just learning. And this is what makes life juicy. And if J.K. Rowling had given up, if there's so many amazing people who are influencing our lives right now, Oprah, of course, being like one of the top ones, who everyone was like, you're too fat. You're not pretty enough. You're not good enough. You're, and look at her now. She's like, really? Speaking of going like this.
Right.
I'm super grateful
and
for
Steve
Steve
Jobs cover of every
too.
magazine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm just
my house wouldn't
yes.
operate without my Apple devices. So thank God for Steve Jobs being okay being weird, right?
Seriously.
So thinking about failure and specifically kids, one of the things that I was thinking about again while I was doing all this research is the idea that if we condition our kids, and I should back up and say last week we talked, Taboo Talk was about parenting and specifically like parenting and technology and like the modern world. And one of the things that came up a lot was the idea of what we model for our kids is really how they're going to interact with tech. But thinking about it with fear, the same idea, if we don't model for our children and really teach the generation of tomorrow that to be willing to deal with failure, right? To be willing to deal with change. We also don't then condition them and educate them on how to deal with needing to quit and needing to know when to draw the boundary of saying, I'm done. Like I've gone as far as I can go. Because we know a lot of us as adults, we're talking about like taking on a business venture or taking on a new relationship or, something that's a lot more, again, like intangible. But when you're younger, there comes points where like you need to draw a clean boundary for your own well-being. And if we don't set kids up to have the experience of failure or fear what's going to happen next, then they also don't get the experience of knowing how to set a clean boundary and what it looks like to quit and quit powerfully. So I think that like this whole idea that fear, again, going back to how we started, that fear and failure are bad and need to be fixed. I think that there's something kind of like systematically dangerous about that for the generations of tomorrow.
Right. But what I think you're talking about is teaching children about that course correction is okay at pretty much at any point. You can change your mind. And I look at, there's so many things that I've done in my life that I thought I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to.
Come back.
Okay, we're back. I don't know what happened. I wasn't even touching my computer and it just like, anyway. Sorry, Terry, you were saying about kids and teaching them how to change directions and be willing to change course.
Yep. And that was pretty much all I was saying. Just saying that there's something valuable about teaching them to keep, wait, I am too following her. Stop it. There's something about you want to teach kids the power of staying the course if it's what you want to do, if it's whatever. And then there's also something valuable, as you were saying, Sunny, in basically teaching kids how to course correct or giving them the space to change their mind. But the way you were saying it before, I took it more like you were saying drawing a boundary. It sounded different. So what were you actually talking about? Teaching kids to draw boundaries. What did you mean?
I think that I'm not a parent, right? So we're kind of getting into the parenting range, and I'm just going to quantify this with I'm a great aunt, I mentor, but I'm not actually responsible for anyone's development. But I see a culture of very like the helicopter moms that hover and like try to protect their kids from ever having to deal with anything negative. So like even on the playground, not letting their kids take risks. And I feel like what that does is it robs the child of opportunities to know when to quit. So let's say a kid wants to cross the monkey bars. The mom's afraid he's going to fall. The kid not having the experience of being able to grab the monkey bar, get halfway across and go, Mom, I quit, come help me. Or to drop down and hurt himself a little bit, right? Whatever the case may be, there's something that comes developmentally from having to go through that experience. And if we shield our kids today from that, out of pure heart, wanting to protect them, what is that going to do to their ability to deal with things like, should I start a business? Should I buy this car? Should I try this relationship? And knowing when to, draw the boundary and say, I'm out of this relationship, it's no longer healthy. If mom and dad are always there to protect. I
see this a lot with grown younger people. So people in their 20s and early 30s now, where they're they never separated and individuated from the parents because the parents kind of didn't allow it culturally. What ends up happening is that you have a grown adult who cannot make decisions, who is super insecure, who is constantly looking to the parent. And to me, from a therapeutic point of view, that the parents are selfish, insecure, narcissistic. Like, why is it still about you when you have grown kids? No, It's about them when they're little. And then have you ever read The Prophet? Has anyone ever read The Prophet? This is all about like, you get the honor and the privilege of having these kids for 18 years. And then they are the arrow and you are supposed to do this and let them go and be with them and be supportive and love them and encourage them to have their own life, to have their own experience. Once they're grown up, they're not living to make you happy and they shouldn't ever be. And if you're doing that to your kids, like you are doing them a disservice. And you know what? You're an obligation. They don't even want to hang out with you. They just feel good. So, just saying.
After last week's Taboo Talk on parenting, we ended up deciding to do another one at the end of March where we're going to specifically talk about parenting. And I don't know how to phrase it yet, but kind of goal setting and like the idea of intentionally parenting with the goal of having them become self-sustaining and actually like thinking about the future and how you're developing them versus, people who are just like kind of in survival mode and trying to survive their kids because they're little hellions or whatever the case may be. I mean, what you're talking about, Terry, really points to that. The idea of, and I actually have acquaintances that are, totally adult children. And they say they're adulting, but in reality, they're still really closely linked to their parents. And I don't know if it comes from their parents not letting them have the experience of doing something even though the parent can clearly see it's going to be a failure, or encouraging child to do something even though that they have a fear of it. But I can't help but think that there's some correlation between the helicopter moms and kids not knowing how to experience that.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of fear. I
was going to say, to your original question about knowing when to quit, one of the things that I try to do is look at, again, the thoughts behind it. Like, why do I want to quit? What's really going on in the background? Then again, examining, am I afraid of something, or is this really not a good fit for me? So when you asked about drawing the boundaries and knowing when to quit, that's how I judge. Like, what is the thought and the reason behind it versus.
And then teaching a child how to quit appropriately, properly. Go to the coach, have a conversation face to face, not on text, not on email. Like, you know what I mean?
No temper tantrums.
No, and also not having the parent do it. Even younger children can take the responsibility. A sixth grader, a healthy parent says, okay, this happened with one of my sisters and her son. Okay, but you need to go and talk to the coach. And the family was very much like, you stick to what you're going to do. Like you said, you're going to do it. And he had his reasons why he didn't want to continue, and he went and talked to the coach. And what you learn is the skills to negotiate systems by having to have a hard conversation when you're in 6th or 7th grade. Totally. But you can do it. And kids will rise and fall to your expectations. So if you think they're infants when they're 35, that is the way they will behave.
I think that's so interesting that you bring up that situation, because I don't think my brother will mind me sharing this. He really hated football when he was playing earlier. And my mom said, no, you're going to finish the season because you asked to play. And so she was saying, after you finish the season, then you get to decide if you'll go or you'll stay. And I remember him writing a story, maybe it was for back to school or something, about the boy who learned to love football. Now, he never played it again, ever again. But that was a character building moment where she said, no, you said you were going to do X, yes, and you will stay the course until this point, and then you can decide.
She also, what she was doing for him from a therapeutic point of view is saying, I know you can do it, and I expect you to keep your word.
That's a big one, the first one. Like the experience of a child having their parent subconsciously or straight up say, I know you can handle this. Like that's a huge thing. I'm an adult and I still appreciate hearing that from my mom, you know? So like, I can't even imagine, I don't remember being 8, but I'm sure that that's a huge one. And again, if you don't set your kids up in a situation where they could potentially fail, you're not then giving them that experience of, hey, yeah, it might go bad, but I'll be here for you. And I think you'll be fine.
Right. And we don't want failure to be something that we avoid at all costs, because then your life is literally being run by your mafia mind and becomes super small. Yeah. It's okay to fail. You're not fragile, people. You're going to all be okay. I've failed spectacularly and I'm just fine. And I'm very successful, you know, but I think that those failures really dictated my successes as well, or not dictated, but they've supported my successes.
Can you guys both give me you said something earlier, Terry, about how it's character building. And I think that's with the whole idea of turning fear into fuel or allowing your failure to transform into a success. I think all of that is kind of pointing to, it gives you character. Mm-hmm. What is character to you?
It's funny. It was actually Tavana that said the character building thing about her mom, but what is character building? Being resilient. To me, building character, and I actually don't even use that phrase, but I say it's being resilient, realizing that you're not fragile, that you're going to be okay, and that you're not so tender. So what? If you fail, so what? It's okay. Learn. Here's the thing. If you are going to do anything great in this world, you're going to fail. And if you're going to really do anything great, you're going to learn something from those failures. It's not about humiliation, embarrassment. It's about, what are you willing to stick your hands in that crap stew of failure and yank out the gorgeous gems of wisdom and experience that will transform you? Or are you just like, that was just terrible? Well, okay, then it was, because you just said it was. So I say, let's look in the crap stew for the gems that will transform your life.
How about you, Tavana?
I think it is, when I say character building, it's very similar to what Terry was saying. It helps us to test the limits and see what's possible for ourselves in our lives and just what we can really do versus what we imagine we cannot do. Mm-hmm. To actually put it to the test.
That was really concisely put. That was awesome. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, you just made me think about Tavana. I went to college fairly young, and I had a college instructor my first semester. His name was Doc Lewis. And he taught humanities around religion, but he did a really awesome job of infusing the class with a whole bunch of life lessons. Like, you could tell he got that he had a bunch of like really malleable people in front of him, and he was going to do everything he could to give us every lesson he could. It was awesome. And he spent that whole semester like browbeating us with the idea of, in life, you can be a victim or you can be a victor. You choose. If you're a victim, you're constantly going to have, you know, and it's obvious to me now, but I remember being like 18 years old and being like, oh, I don't want to be a victim, right? And I think that's, to me, that's character, that somebody who has character and who's built character has gone through the process and has decided time and again, no matter how small, it's all relative to your life, that they're going to be the victor versus allowing themselves to be a victim. So to answer your question, Benjamin, I think we kind of just did, but yeah, I think the more character building failures you go through, it's your choice if it makes your character stronger or weaker. If you come out of that failure and feel like it's not, you can, I just lost the flow. You can come out of that failure and feel like a victim and feel like something else happened. It's not your fault. Dear. And, not take a moment to look at what you can learn from it and where you can go with it next. Right.
But that requires you to give up the victim position.
Absolutely. And it comes back to your point of having that moment to notice and observe and like be still with, like, just be with it all for a minute.
Right. Well, I can still see you, Tavana. Can you not hear us?
I can see and hear you all, but apparently I'm only on audio.
No? Oh, I can see you. Can you see?
I can see you too. It might just be for some people depending on their, Sarah says she can see your pouty face.
Oh, see? Yeah. So someone still saw you.
We got another question that came in. Most of us need a support group to make us comfortable failing big. How has the digitizing of our social life affected that support system? Excellent question, my brother. What do you ladies think?
I think it's better. I mean, I think it's better.
I was going to say that too.
Yep.
Yeah, I have accountability partners and mastermind groups with people that I've never met before that are across the country, in other countries because of social media. So that has actually given me more support, because when you're a coach and when you subscribe to things like the 4-hour work week, everybody doesn't think like that. When you are an entrepreneur and you want to live a location independent lifestyle, everybody doesn't think like that. So if you're used to being around a whole bunch of W-2 employees and you can't reach out and touch someone who is a like-minded individual, you have access to them via the web. So.
Absolutely.
Could not have said it better.
I will say though that I think that there is a risk to it becoming overly digitized, in that, because I do the digital nomad thing. I have a totally location independent business and I'm on the go and I run my business through social media. I grow it through social media. So I'm super connected digitally. And I do think that it requires a certain amount of balance and intentionality to not allow yourself to disappear into the digital world. I know I posted a video in promoting the Taboo Talk that it's older, but it's a guy who basically, travels around his city and takes pictures that are staged in order to look good on social media and to get the support. And, you kind of get addicted to the response that you get from people, and people tend to respond positively to positive status updates and negatively to negative updates. And you can manipulate a digital group in your favor to get whatever support you want. So I do think that it's important, with us being in such a digital age, to still make sure that we have those physical, human, in-person, like heart-to-heart conversations to keep yourself accountable, so that you don't go into that like digital persona world. That's my take.
I totally agree with that. And I also see this thing happening on social media and in the world of empowerment and inspiration, where there's all these different styles emerging. And one I call like reality TV style coaching, where someone's like, Friday night, me and my boyfriend of 20 years broke up, and it's Monday, you're getting the email and they're like, I want to tell you everything I learned and how you can learn it too. You're like, okay, it's been 48 hours. You didn't learn anything. You're not teaching me anything. Like,
yep.
I'm not into this whole like train wreck style of teaching and sharing. If you're supposed to be an expert, and if you're setting yourself up, if you are an expert, I don't, I have friends, I have a therapist, I've got coaches. Like, I don't need to be out there with my stuff in that way, because I don't find it professional for me. But I feel like there's different styles. So I guess what you're saying is right. People can get what they want. I guess it's just not my thing to do it in that way.
Yeah. I know I run a Facebook group that I call the Small Business Support Group. And my thing there is that I ask everybody to be authentic and to, celebrate, but also admit when you're having a downtime and share how you're dealing with that. So I know I'll go out there and say, like, I haven't done much this week. I've been in my own head. I've been afraid of, I've not wanted to do the work, whatever the case may be. And it kind of sucks. And I think that it's important to share when things aren't going well as when they are. And I also tend to call BS when somebody's like, I failed big time yesterday and I'm back on top. It's like, that's not human. Like, so I think there's a balance to all of it. And I know Sarah was saying in the chat that if you're supposed to look it on social media, then she's doing it wrong. And I got to say, Sarah Piggott, she's a blogger in Orlando. She's really awesome at being really human in her social media feed. She posted something today about giving herself a pencil mustache, and I was like, oh my God, I've done that a million times. I think it makes you relatable. And I think there's something about the digital communities where it's easy to make a persona, and it's easy to falsify the support without even being malicious about it. So I just think there's a balance that's needed. You still need that heart-to-heart support. Oh, sure. And I'm really grateful that we are as digital as we are, because I totally run my business that way and I live my life that way. And, it's just, you got to balance it all.
So the balance that I find is I network offline and I also network online. So I try to do half and half. And I do have accountability partners and masterminds and things like that. But with one of my mastermind groups, half of the time we meet in person at a restaurant, and the other half we meet in the comfort of our home or wherever we happen to be that day, just for the flexibility.
Yeah. And to take that out of the business context, you guys, the same thing applies for your friends. Like I have friends that I only ever see on social media, and we live in the same city. So every once in a while I'll do like a tally and be like, yo, let's get together. You live like 5 houses down. Let's have coffee. Like, I want to know you IRL. Right. So in real life. Yes. Sorry. Geek term. Benjamin posted a question. Do people nowadays like being victims instead of relatively taking responsibility? And I would say, Benjamin, that I think I do this thing where I always encourage people to curate their social media feed the same as they would their life. So if I see people who are constantly making themselves the victim in their own life, and they're looking at failures and they're fearing things and they're taking a victim mentality, I tend to not follow them. Like I'll stay friends with them on social media, but I don't let their feed show up for me. I don't want to attract that to me. The same thing with friends in real life. Like if people are constantly taking the victim route, I love them through it, and I tend to not engage in that with them. And I find that around me, a lot of my friends tend to be victors, and a lot of what I tend to see on my social media feed is people who tend to be victors in their own life. But I know that that's because that's what I choose to surround myself with. So it's like broadly socially, I don't know. Do you guys have like a pulse on that where you could make like a sweeping assessment?
Well, I was going to say, I don't know that I would say that people like being the victims per se. I think there's a lot of lack of awareness that that's what they're doing, and that they actually have a say-so in the matter.
Right. I agree with that's exactly what I was going to say about like, I don't think anyone likes it. I feel like there's a lack of awareness and consciousness. If you're going through your life being like, it's my husband's fault, it's my boss's fault, it's my bitchy best friend's fault, it's everybody's freaking fault. And I want to say, oh, but guess what? What's the common denominator in your life? You. It is not anyone's fault. And I'm not even saying it's your fault, but the reality is that it's your responsibility to make choices that make you happy. Unless being happy is not, I also have had clients in my career where they're so attached to their misery, like super into it, that, they resented the crap out of me because I wanted them to want something else. I'm like, you like it too much. Like, I don't know. I think we're good because you're miserable, which is what you want to be. So why should I keep taking your money? Because I'm trying to make you be happy. You don't want to be happy. So.
You don't want to be happy. Yeah. I want to mention, there's a book, it's called The Art of Possibility. I'll put it in the resources that gets emailed out afterwards, but it references some of the stuff that Terry and I keep circling around. I don't know if you've read it, Tavana, if you're smiling at Sarah's antics, but The Art of
Sarah.
The Art of Possibility is an awesome book, and it talks a lot about how to tame your monkey brain, how to take a deep breath, be present, be the observer. There's just it kind of gets into the mechanics of some of the stuff that we're talking about. So I would highly recommend that as a read. If a lot of what Terry and I are pointing to is stuff that is foreign to you guys, that's a great primer to kind of get into that world a little bit. Benjamin, I don't quite know how to interpret your latest question. If you want to retype it, I'll give it another shot. He says, do accountability affecting your flexibility work for checking up on associated workers? And I'm just not quite sure what you mean by that, Benjamin. I would say that the way it's worded, it sounds like, can you use accountability in the workplace? And I would say anytime you have accountability, it needs to be requested and defined. You can't just like show up and hold something. Like, I could not go to my brother's house and hold him accountable for how he relates to my mother without his permission. That would just be being a bossy sister, which would not be unlike me. Don't go anywhere, John. I'm not saying I wouldn't do that, but it wouldn't be accountability.
Okay.
Laura, all three of you have very healthy attitudes about fear and failure. What advice can you give for others to start moving away from crippling fear and having healthier relationships with it? Well, thank you.
Yeah. Because that wasn't me like, well, 5 years ago, 3 years ago. What was the first step? Just, that's a really good question. Because it's like you're so far removed from it now. How do you go back to when you started making the change? I think it was just being sick and tired of being sick and tired. You know, tired of being afraid, tired of being the victim, tired of beating myself up for so many things. Once I just got sick and tired of it, I just looked for another way. And then once you are seeking truth or seeking an answer to it, and as long as you keep pointed in the direction of seeking the truth and seeking the answer, it's all going to come. All of the knowledge and truth will come your way. So I think you're really actually doing the first step by being here and being present and saying, hey, I recognize this is a problem and I want to correct it. I'm open to trying things another way.
Yeah.
I think that's great advice.
I would say too, surround yourself with people that handle life the way you wish you did. So like if you see yourself taking kind of a victim's approach and you know you're doing it and you just don't want to, but you don't know how to get out of it, find people who you think approach their life from a victor mentality and surround yourself with them and, you know, pick their brain for resources. How did they do it? Because they weren't always that way. Nobody's born just taking life on as a victor. I guarantee you. Everybody's had to go through some critical moment where they had that switch. So ask people, interview people, what was it for you? I know for me, it's a lot of reading and surrounding myself with other people and taking the time, like Terry was saying, to be an observer in my own life. And for me, the biggest catalyst was doing that year of I'm going to be uncomfortable. Whenever I see something that's uncomfortable, I'm just going to step into it and see what happens and just pause and notice how interesting when I fail and just see what comes out of it. But that doesn't work for everybody. I'm weird. So you got to find your own path.
I think that the awareness that Tavana pointed out is no matter where you are in your journey right now with fear, the awareness that you have the power to change how you're relating to fear right now. And really the truth, fear is just a feeling 95% of the time. And if you really get that in your mind, that unless someone has a gun to your head, then it's a fact, right? So then you should run or fight or whatever. But really start analyzing, as you were saying before, Tavana, really looking at, why is this a script that rolls? Because if you start thinking about your fearful script, it's like the same crap, like different days, same shit. The mind just says the same boring old crap. It's so tired. Aren't you bored? And I agree with you. You just get sick and, Tavana said, you're just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And if you're sick and tired enough, you will seek out the resources, the people, the models of behavior. As Sunny was saying, that's like such a great idea, which I always say to clients as well. Like, look at someone who's living the life you want. Do your own version of that life. Find out how they got there. Because trust me, nobody came out of the womb being unafraid of things. And, these are things you work towards.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite books is You're a Badass. Who wrote it? I can't even think of her name right now, but I'm sure you can Google that. Yeah, you're a badass. Jen Sincero, Sincero, Sincero. And kind of to your point, Sunny, one of the things when I find myself kind of off, if I'm not meditating, I get in that fear space, I just start flooding myself with positive podcasts, books.
Totally.
I'm definitely getting in there and making sure meditation is a priority. Just every tool and resource and thing that I can is just like flood, overload. Nothing else is important. Let me make sure I'm going to sleep. Let me make sure I'm exercising. Everything that I can do to make myself feel good from every angle, I'm going to do it.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to circle back to the idea of finding the people who have the life you want. I want to specifically say too, like that doesn't mean it has to be Oprah, right? Like it can be somebody in your life. It could be your boss at work. It could be a sibling. It could be somebody who's an acquaintance that you've always really admired. And it's just as simple as telling them you admire them and asking if you can pick their brain, have a conversation, or just befriending them in a more meaningful way. It doesn't have to be some big celebrity that has some crazy life that you wish that's super, you know what I mean? Like it can be somebody in your immediate circle that you just start having a different type of friendship with. There's nothing wrong with telling somebody I kind of want your life. Like everybody loves to hear that. And odds are, if they're the kind of person that has a life you want, they're going to be willing to share some of their secrets with you. So it can never hurt just to have a frank conversation. Yeah, awesome.
Oh, you gotta love Sarah's commentary over there.
She's so hilarious.
Right.
She is. All right, let me look at my notes. I think we've really covered the gamut. I think we're probably about ready to wrap up, but let me see if there's anything that I was really excited about that we haven't been able to hit. I guess the last thing, and it was kind of where I started when I put this as the subject for this week, is I feel like a lot of the controversy that we have politically, that we have on the news, that, we're dealing with all over the place, a lot of it comes back to fear. I know I had somebody a family member come to me recently and ask for advice on how to deal with somebody in their office. And at the end of their long spiel about what this person was doing, I was like, what do you think she's afraid of? There's something underneath there that there's a fear, right? So I think fear is at the root of a lot of stuff we deal with. And there's like this scarcity versus abundance conversation that we haven't really touched on a whole lot. And I think that's probably worth us just kind of dipping our toes into a little bit before we wrap up. So I think a lot of times people, when they go into something more theoretical, like a circumstance where they have this fear of failure, they immediately go into the scarcity. Like there's not enough, there's not enough money, there's not enough love, there's not enough people, there's not enough attention, whatever the case may be. And if we can kind of kick the scarcity conversation and just trust that there's an abundance. I know I think it was Tavana, you said something at some point about you choose to believe that you have the skills to take on something if you're given the desire to do it. So it's like you kind of start with the baseline of, I have an abundance of what I need. What does that stir up for you guys, or did I cover it? I probably didn't. What did you guys got?
The scarcity abundance conversation with my clients, I always say, and I firmly believe this, and I feel like this helps, is that what is for you will not pass you. And so no one else can get your stuff, your person, if that person is going with that other person, then they're not your person. And so think about it like you are unique and specific. And so what is yours is yours. Have faith and work towards your goals and do all of those things. But instead of if you want I've had a lot of young women who want to get married, and they'll be like, and I'm just so bummed out. So my friend got engaged and I am happy for her, but I'm like, listen, how about here's evidence that people are still getting engaged. So how about instead of saying why not me? How about saying me next?
Yeah.
Have faith. This is evidence that what you want is still happening in the world. You could be next. So all of that is a shift in consciousness. It's like a shift in your mindset of being because the truth is there is enough. Someone else can't get your crap because it's meant for you. So if you can keep that in your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. The concept that there really is no competition. Why? There's plenty out here for everyone. And one of the things that I have learned, I was actually listening to The Science of Getting Rich, and he talks, Wallace Wattles talks about there being a thinking stuff of which it's growing, it's breathing, it's living, it's expanding all the time. So there is gold somewhere in the mines that has never been mined yet. So should it all run out that we can see right now, there is more, and there will be more created so that you don't have to worry about these things. And I'm going back to my original movie from earlier today. Would it help anyway?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think that was actually what you and I bonded over originally, Tavana, at that networking event, is that we both kind of had said something in our pitch about I don't believe in competition. I believe in collaboration. There's no need to compete because there's enough. So how do we all work together? But again, that means that that's a clear indicator that we're not coming from a place of scarcity, which then you can deduct we handle fear and failure a particular way. The movie that you keep talking about, Tavana, I found the name of it. It's Bridge of Spies. It's in theaters right now.
Thank you. It was fantastic.
It was a really good movie. And I also totally, when the spy guy said that on death row, every time he said it, it got me. I was like, that's,
I was like, that's my mantra.
But yes. Yeah. He's like, why aren't you more worried? Would it help? Why aren't you more scared? Would it help? It was so brilliant. It really was. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Okay, so I think we should probably wrap up. It's getting late. Do you guys have any final words, final resources, pieces of advice, anything you want to leave viewers with on anything we've talked about?
Tavana?
I think we have done a really good job of covering I think we all had a very similar background and, like someone pointed out, a very healthy way of dealing with fear and failure. It doesn't escape us. I don't want anybody that's watching this or listening to us today to think that, oh, okay, they got it nailed and it's perfect. Everything is a practice. And so if it's a practice, it means it's ongoing. And so if you feel like you're at step one, or you've been practicing or working on something for X number of years, because it took me well over a decade to figure that whole weight thing out, nothing's gone wrong here. Everything is exactly how it's supposed to be, and you will overcome this. What do you just need to learn from this, get the feedback, and move on? So,
love it. I think the question is, what are you willing to do to take responsibility for your life? And for so many of my clients, they didn't really know that that was an option. And as soon as they got that it was, I mean, they were just doing modeled behavior, or this is just, these unconscious limiting beliefs. So part of it is that you need to get that up into your conscious mind and make a decision about what you're willing to do. Are you willing to be uncomfortable for a year like Sunny has been? Are you willing to take a decade to do what Tavana has done? This is not success overnight, right? This is staying the course and working that shit every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just to top it all off, I would say it's never too late to start. I had a client text me today and say, I didn't do my homework. I failed. I'm like, no, you didn't. Do it now. Right? It's never it's never too late to start. Yeah, exactly. So like, if there's people watching who are feeling like there's stuff that we're saying that's resonating, regardless of your age, regardless of where you're at in your life or your business or your parenting or whatever it is that you're up against, like it's never too late to start. Go find those people to model, go and read the books that we've been talking about. So to kind of take it into wrap up, if you have signed up at tabootalk.us, you're going to get an email in a couple of days. I'm going to go up and update and include all the movies and the books and the articles that we've been referencing. I'll include Terry's done a TED Talk, which I think is pretty awesome. And she has a podcast. Tavana has a book. So I will include links to all of that stuff so that if you guys want to kind of go back and piggyback off of our research and what we've done to get to where we're at, you can do that because it's not too late to start. And it is a practice. Absolutely. It's a choice and it's a practice. And yeah. So thank you, ladies, for playing with me and dealing with the technical difficulties.
That was fun.
Thank you. And yeah, I do this every week. So Taboo Talk is like a weekly personal experiment I've taken on every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. I do this on a different subject with different guests. Last week was parenting and tech. You can go watch the replay. Next week is going to be very woo-woo. I get woo-woo sometimes. We're doing the next one. Next week is feminine versus masculine energy. So not like gender roles, but like the energetic presence of femininity or masculinity. Yes, it's going to be very woo-woo. I'm very excited. I have 3 really awesome guests lined up. The week after that's going to be sexuality. So tune in again next week, and then you can watch the replay as well. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, guys. Go sign up at tabootalk.us to get the email. All right. Bye.
Bye.